Has he shot anybody?
He fired a shot. I don't know if he shot her or not. And he just choked me. And I'm afraid for my son and my baby. Please hurry, please.
Oh my God! Where are you at?
Victims of domestic violence, they're like a prisoner of war.
Officers have to understand that either you're our knight in shining armor or you're our worst nightmare.
The police are on their way, okay?
The question is, when do we change the culture and all stand up and say that violence against women is something we're not going to tolerate in policing? This is not easy.
Stay there, stay there. I'm coming.
What's easy is for me to sit here and to tell officers exactly what they need to do. I know how hard these cases are.
I need cuffs. Post Falls, we have one male detained. I don't know, she's right over there, contact her.
Okay, she's bleeding from the face.
Most crime that law enforcement responds to are incident-based. It's a single occurrence, whereas when we look at domestic violence, it's a course of conduct. It's multiple incidents over often extended periods of time.
When a victim calls the police, it may have been the 6th or 7th incident.
Which is really important because I think that when law enforcement come and they see that there's been a physical altercation, there's usually been this whole history of things that have happened before then that don't always rise to criminal behavior, but tell the full story of how powerless she is in the context of the relationship.
An abuser found my mother, and it was my stepfather. And it was emotional, it was psychological, it was really physical, near-death experiences over and over again over a 10-year period. The officer that came to my house stood on our front porch, and I heard him tell my mother, if we come out here one more time, you're going to jail. And my mother just shook. I mean, and it's one thing for a parent to hold a trembling child, it's a whole other thing for a child to hold a trembling parent. And I never forgot it.
The victim of abuse, who may have used a level of violence in defending herself, who now gets arrested, now what do they think of the justice system as far as being a system of help and a system that they can turn to? And what'll happen is they simply won't.
If you had a cheat sheet in your pocket, here's what you want to do. You want to identify the offender, you want to identify the victim, you want to locate the offender, you want to document your evidence, and you want to find your probable cause.
Do not move, all right?
Yeah, it's okay for her to hit me in the face, right?
We'll get this all figured out in just a minute, all right?
Fuck that.
I like to call this bully determination. Determine in the relationship who's the bully, and you'll have your predominant aggressor.
I hit my wife. I love her more than anything. I shouldn't have hit her.
I know you love her.
I shouldn't have hit her. I shouldn't have hit her.
Was it out of the heat of the moment? I mean, was it a reaction?
It was out of the heat of the moment. After she hit me in the face, I punched her in the face, but my face looks a lot less worse than her face does.
One of the encounters we'll have would be with the perpetrator who plays off as the victim.
She punched me in the face, and then she told Becca to call the cops.
Okay.
I told Becca not to call the cops because it wasn't worth her going to jail.
We've got to be careful to work through that we don't automatically buy the story of one over the other.
You've got to look at the history. You've got to look at what the neighbors have said. You've got to look at the injuries. You've got to look at what the past reports have told you. You've got to look at the behavior of the victim. You've got to look at the behavior of the offender.
She said she tripped over this. There's the phone that's destroyed. Yeah, it looks like it's been smashed with a hammer.
You can't do this in 5 or 10 minutes. This takes time. It takes an investment.
We need to put just as much into a domestic violence call as we do a traffic accident investigation.
I still don't know the whole story. I just got his story, so I don't know what your side is.
I'll talk to you.
Okay, well, you want to go. I just want to make sure the kiddos don't have to hear it, and somewhere where you're comfortable.
They're really approaching it as a conversation as opposed to an investigation where you have to have her standing, you have to have her in a certain room, you have to, do this, but to give her a little bit of autonomy and choice about how this is going to happen is huge.
Just let them know that you're concerned about their safety. The most important thing, I'm concerned about your safety.
My kids have never seen anything like this in their life.
Okay, and they shouldn't. You shouldn't have gone through this, ever.
And you say that sincerely, directly, eyeball to eyeball to that person so that they know. Because the victim is so afraid to tell you what's going on that they will not share with you.
What's going to get at that kind of thing is a conversation, is rapport building, is warmth, is understanding, is time.
How many times would you say over the last 2 years?
A lot.
Can you give me a number, just a guesstimate?
Probably 12.
Have you ever reported it?
Never.
Why not?
It's very scary. He takes my phone. Threatens me a lot.
He always takes your phone when he
Yeah.
drinks? Okay, and then he threatens you?
Yeah.
What does he say?
I'll kill you. I'll kill your kid.
If you call the police?
Yeah.
And when we look at domestic violence, we know that often there are behaviors that have meaning only between that victim and offender. And so anybody from the outside will see something and will think it's benign or harmless, but to that victim, it absolutely can be terrifying and threatening.
He used to get a look. Before things got physical, he would get a look. And you can't describe it. And that's the thing that's really hard to explain to the police too when they're escalating. Well, he got a look. How do you explain that?
Don't be judge and jury in that moment. Just believe her. Let the process take care of itself. One of the most disheartening and frustrating things for people in crisis, particularly victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and stalking, is feeling that you have to prove the case in the instant of crisis, when that is not what the process is supposed to be about. You're supposed to get help.
Where did, in your face? Okay. All right, I can see your lips a little bloody. And then he said he smothered you with the pillow? Was he sitting on top of you when he did that?
He got the pillow over my face and he couldn't breathe.
Okay.
You're not going to have the perfect cookie cutter victim.
And then what happened?
This victim may be all over the place on her story. This victim may not make a lot of sense because, you know what, this is something pretty traumatic that just happened to this person. And that's the way victim trauma plays out.
As a matter of fact, when she doesn't cooperate, that's evidence. When we see trauma in her, that's evidence. When we see her say, don't take him to jail, that's evidence. When we see the kid say, Daddy didn't do anything to Mommy, that's evidence, because I can get on the stand now and testify that what most often happens in a domestic violence case is the victims are so controlled, they do things completely opposite of other crime victims.
Judge, charge of domestic violence, there's a protection order filed, no victim present?
There is a victim present, Your Honor. She asked to remain outside. She is fearful to come and walk.
In a courtroom setting, a victim in many instances might, whether the defendant has said anything or not, still be intimidated and be afraid to say anything other than, I just want it to go away.
If we stop at just the arrest, you're under arrest for, and we don't understand how to get to the conviction, we lose. Who do we blame? Do we blame ourselves? Who do we blame? Daggone prosecutors. Damn, they suck. Damn, they get their law degree at. Right? Hell yeah, we do.
I don't know what the emotions were like. I don't know how distressed or calm people were. Only the officer can paint a picture for me of how it was when they arrived. But writing down specifically what they say versus she described an assault, I saw visible injuries. Statements like, I am afraid of suspect. Specific quotes about her fears, her current emotional state, that can be admitted into evidence.
I'm sorry you had to go through this, okay? And it doesn't matter if you recanted, okay? It still happened, okay? It still happened, and we understand why people recant sometimes.
The more evidence that you can put in front of the court, the more that you can allow the court to see what you see.
Lady did not wish to prosecute at the scene, and the detective signed the complaint. I did.
The more likely it is that the emphasis is going to be removed from just the statements of the victim, and it's going to focus on the totality of the circumstances that surround the event.
This case belongs to the city of Cleveland, not to the alleged victim.
Abusers and batterers can be incredibly creative and incredibly manipulative. And so when we think about the types of behaviors they engage in, it could be really anything, and in some cases, everything.
So often domestic violence cases or incidents involve some level of financial abuse. And that can range from using their credit cards or ruining their credit to putting things in their wives' or their girlfriends' names that they're unaware of. That makes it really hard to separate. Pet abuse is a huge one that we always look for. I did have a case where he killed her dog, snapped its neck in front of her and said, "This is what I'll do to you next time."
Batterers and abusers often engage in stalking behaviors. And when we have that combination of physical abuse and stalking, the risk of lethality for those victims goes up dramatically.
I had emails, I had text messages, I had calls, I had emails from different email addresses. He would send me videos, he would send me pictures, it was constant. It was constant.
Can't give me an answer, Dana? Just give me an answer, please. Scared, terrified. You don't deserve to be hit on and choked and all that. You would rather have me keep calling than to give me an answer, Dana?
Individually, in most cases, those acts are not criminal acts. But when you see them together as part of that course of conduct, then we can start looking at them as stalking behavior.
At least half the time, you're going to also have sexual assault going on in that same relationship. If kids are in that home, at least half the time, they're also being physically or sexually abused. If I don't ask, it's not going to be volunteered.
You're really talking about relationship and building trust, and you want me to tell you the most intimate details of my life that are important because they may save my life if I tell you. But it's very hard to tell to a stranger.
You're laying on your back?
I'm laying on my back.
Okay.
Like both his hands on my throat, and he's like lifting his knee up to put it on my neck. And then he started mimicking me when I was screaming.
Take your time if you need to.
The police officer, he just checked in with me constantly. We're eye level. He had his whole body turned towards me. His demeanor, his expressions, he just seemed genuinely sorry at what I had gone through. And I don't know. After all that, to have a grown man be nice, I don't know, it mattered. It was helpful.
On average, it takes a victim approximately 7 times to separate before they completely separate from that relationship.
When you finally get this as a police officer, it's like you've lifted a veil from your face and you can finally see this crime for what it really is. Leaving a violent relationship is not an event, it's a process.
Every little step, every positive response that victim might have with law enforcement can further empower them to leave that relationship.
You have to have patience, and you have to be caring, and you have to provide some comfort to that person. How would you want your family member to be cared for if another officer was responding there? And it's just that simple. You have to think about it as if this is happening to you or to someone that you love.
You shouldn't have gone through this, ever.